Hi, everybody. It's Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute, calling in today from Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. This is a very sobering and poignant moment for Canadians with the discoveries this week of the visible tragedies associated with residential schools, and that will continue, I'm sure, to be uncovered, and we will continue to try to come to terms with the legacies of exclusion and how these have been reinforced by the way we build our cities and communities. And we had this session planned some time ago, just happened to fall in this week, but we appreciate that there will be people tuning in today who have visceral personal experience of this, family members of themselves, people that they know, or it may be people's first introduction to really seeing up close the scope of what occurred and what continues to occur in different kinds of ways across the country. So we gathered today with many partners to come to terms with what truth and reconciliation needs to look like in Canada, and particularly those of us that are involved in community building and city building. This session is co-hosted with Engineers of Canada, and I want to thank them and Cassandra and her colleagues for working to develop this session. And we're doing what we've only done a few times. We're doing a film screening and a conversation. So we really appreciate people being willing to experiment with this format and try different ways to share our learnings and our knowledge and our understanding of, and grow in our understanding of the implications of how we actually build communities. So the producers of the film, especially Andre Casabon, who you can see on the screen here, has joined us, and she is part of an interesting program. This film is actually part of a program offered through the Reconciliation Education online educational program. And if you take it, it's a anti-racist, classroom-based basic foundations on reconciliation with Indigenous voices. It's 3 hours long, 10 interactive modules designed to educate all Canadians. And you all have access to that. And it comes with a certificate of completion from First Nations University. So that's an added incentive. And I hope that not only will you watch it, but you can follow the links to this program, and you'll be able to share the film with other people to watch it as well. The Canadian Urban Institute is working not only with the engineers, but also with the Canadian Institute of Planners, the Royal Architectural Society of Architects, the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, the National Trust, the Urban Land Institute, the Urban Development Institute in Victoria, on how do we, as folks that are working with the people that actually build and design cities, how do we need to change? How do we need to adapt? How do we need to be much more cognizant of these kinds of exclusionary practices and how they need to change? And on the 21st of June, there's going to be a subsequent session on the City Talk platform to talk about interdisciplinary approaches, particularly with Indigenous practitioners, people who have followed in the footsteps of Douglas Cardinal and who are actually building cities now and who are at the fore of their profession. So that's on the 21st. You'll see it at City Talk Canada. Now, on these sessions, we have an active chat function, and we encourage you to use that chat. We just want to really appeal to people to be respectful and to honor the moment that we're in and the opportunity that we have to listen to one another and be respectful of each other's perspectives. So if you want to use closed captions, which is a new thing for us and it's working very well, they should be appearing at the bottom of the screen. But you can take them off, just go to toggle on that switch and say off, and then you won't have to read that. We appreciate people are checking in and telling us where they're watching from, and acknowledging the ancestral territories that they, if they're settlers, which they occupy. All the videos and the transcripts and everything, remember, everything that goes into the chat stays in the chat. It'll be at City Talk Canada as well. And we'll post a video of this session, which we hope you will share with your colleagues and watch again and all that kind of thing. So we're going to watch this wonderful film, Douglas Cardinal, Architect of the Future, followed by a conversation between Douglas, the main event, and Randy Herman, who is from the Engineering Access Program at the University of Manitoba. So I'm going to pass to you, Randy, to give us some words to get us started. And as I said, really appreciative of all of you, Douglas, Randy, and Andrea, for coming on today and for all that we're going to experience together going forward. So over to you, Randy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mary. First, I'd like to welcome everybody here today and just let everyone know what an absolute honor it is for me to be sitting here, at least virtually, with Douglas Cardinal. He is and has been for many years somewhat of a hero of mine. So this is just absolutely fantastic for me. Before we get started, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their culture. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Let us acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I would also like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the historic and ongoing trauma of the residential school system, including last week's tragic discovery of 215 children's remains at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School on Tusquamloops-Tiswampum First Nations grounds. Together, let's mourn the Indigenous families and communities over this tragic loss. We are here today to screen the film Douglas Cardinal, Architect of the Future, written by his wife, Idoia Orana Fiopade Cardinal, and produced by Andre Casabon, who we also have here today. As many of you know, Elder Douglas Cardinal is a nationally and internationally recognized architect. Many of you may also know that he is an Indigenous man of Métis, Anishinaabe, Blackfoot, Algonquin, and German ancestry. Elder Cardinal is a son, husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He is an elder of the Kainai Nation of Southern Alberta. Douglas is a leader and a visionary, contributing to Canadian and international movements of sustainability, green buildings, and ecologically designed community planning. His architecture is an inspiration for many and springs from his observation of nature and an understanding of balance, natural beauty, and ultimately respect for Mother Earth. In recognition of his work, Douglas Cardinal has received many national and international awards, including 20 honorary doctorates, gold medals of architecture in Canada and Russia, and an award from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, for Best Sustainable Village. He was also titled an Officer of the Order of Canada, one of the most prestigious awards given to a Canadian. And he was awarded the declaration of being World Master of Contemporary Architecture by the International Association of Architects. In the tradition of many Indigenous people on Turtle Island, we have passed tobacco to Elder Cardinal. I have a pouch of tobacco here, and I know, Douglas, you have received tobacco by mail. I am offering it to you with gratitude for the knowledge and wisdom you will share with us today. After this event, I will take this tobacco and offer a prayer to the Creator in a good way. Today, we're also joined by the film's producer, Andre Casabon. Andre is a Gemini nominee, and her films have amassed over 1 million viewers on CBC News World, TVA, Canal D, Radio Canada, and CBC Television, and have been featured at film festivals around the world. Andre will be online with us during the event today. So if you have any questions for her or Douglas, feel free to enter them into the chat. Thank you for joining us, Andre. And thank you for joining us, Douglas. Now, if you will, we're going to start a bit of a chat with Douglas Cardinal. I have some questions that we've already prepped to ask him, but if time permits at the end, we will look at the chat and ask questions out of the chat, but I can't guarantee that we'll get to everybody's question. But if you have any questions you wish to ask and they're not being covered, then feel free to post them into the chat and we'll see about getting to them. So, Douglas, I heard a story once about your design for St. Mary's Church, which, if those in the audience don't know, was one of your first projects. And it was a difficult project for you. And the structural engineers told you that your proposed roof design was unbuildable and it would not work. So in accordance with your Indigenous upbringing, you went onto the land to ponder the situation. And as you walked, you observed nature and you saw a spider spinning a web. And you thought to yourself, well, look at this spider carefully spanning such long distances with such a thin piece of fiber. And this led you to the breakthrough idea you used to design the roof of St. Mary's. Can you speak more about your philosophy of using nature, its curves, and its ideas in your design?
Well, nature has an infinite variety of solutions of structure, mechanical, electrical, and how they're all integrated like architecture. And so it has always been my source of inspiration to see how nature has solved it. And so I knew the problem that we had was that we had to solve it analytically as engineers. We had to solve it analytically, and analytically we had 81,000 simultaneous equations that had to close. And so we had that many unknowns, like in geometry, X, Y, and Z. Solving 3 unknowns is complicated enough, but how about 81,000? And they said it would take 7 men working full-time, 100 years to solve the equations. And that was impossible. So, so we looked everywhere for computers to solve it. I knew that our computer technology would be able to solve those equations. And we looked everywhere and we found a computer in Chicago. It was actually a building, and they had invented transistors at the time, so there was tubes. You remember the old radios with tubes and old televisions with tubes before they invented transistors? This was floors and floors of tubes. So the whole building was a computer, and we used cards, punch cards, and it was very complex, but they solved it in a matter of days. So we were able to solve it analytically, and we had the best engineers. Actually, I remember H.R. Ricketts, who did the towers, one in also Toronto and Calgary, and they were just amazing engineers, and we needed the best minds to solve the problem, and they were the ones that solved it with all these engineers and the technology, where we used Swedish cables that were covered in plastic so they could slip in the concrete to be able to pull the structure together. It was almost like one of those dolls that have strings in them, and then you tighten them and they stand upright. So we post-tensioned the roof. And I had a very powerful professor from Mexico, Felix Candela, who did shell design. And I felt that that architects should learn about structure, mechanical, electrical, that we should know all the engineering in order to be able to solve a building holistically. And that it was very important for me to take that training, that engineering training, because how am I going to put a building together unless I understood the engineering disciplines, which was so paramount. And I feel that architects should know that, those disciplines. And so I went to a university that supplied it. And because we have to look at things in a holistic way, you know. How can you design a building and have it stand up without knowledge of engineering? And so I thoroughly appreciate your discipline.
Yeah, for those that don't know, I don't know if it was quite clear, is that I work on the other side of the coin. I'm an engineer, and I come at things with a very engineering mindset. And the other thing I'd just like to point out, when Douglas Cardinal designed St. Mary's Church, I believe it was in the early 60s, and computers were not necessarily a thing that was being used inside of architecture or engineering offices at that time. So it was really quite revolutionary, his idea of using that. Another thing I picked up, and again, we don't know each other very well personally. We've met a few times. But yet when we've talked yesterday briefly, and even through this film, it's quite apparent the influence women have had on your personal life and the importance of women to your culture. And in the documentary, you mentioned the sort of the patriarchal dominance in Western architecture, and sort of the idea with the patriarchal dominance comes a subjugation of land beneath it. And I'm pretty sure that even nowadays, that architecture, like engineering, is still a place dominated by males. And probably predominantly by males, white males, probably. And I know this might be a very big question, but if more women, Indigenous people, and people of color were better represented in the field of architecture, how do you think this field would change?
I believe we need that diversity, and also I feel that we need the maternal values that women have to offer to us. And I feel that it is so important to come from the heart, because my elders taught me that the hard power of force is not as powerful as the soft power of loving and caring. And we need that very powerful loving and caring that our mothers and the mothers of our children have to teach us. So I think it's so important to honor the really traditional position of the women throughout time, because they have provided a whole gift economy of gifting life to the world and nurturing it, and really there's not enough recognition of their tremendous value in our society. And what I really embrace is the way that our Indigenous people embrace the power of the women, and embrace the power of their voices in the governance of our people. The clan mother was so important to our communities, the clan mothers, and their position, their point of view, because our whole society was based on the principles of loving and caring, and that everything that we do should come from the heart, should come from loving and caring. Because the creation is about respecting and loving and caring all life. And so that's so important to embrace. And that's why we men used to go to the sweat lodges to sit on the earth, and the elders running it would make sure that we humbled ourselves to our mother, the earth, um, and understood that power of humility to the forces of the planet. Whereas women, they are reminded, they're reminded every month, not only their connection to the earth, but their connection to the moon. And so they're always reminded that. And therefore, they don't need to be reminded as much as we men do. That's why we should experience these ceremonies that humble us to the earth, like our very powerful sweat lodges and ceremonies. And I felt it was very, very important to be trained by the elders and go through these ceremonies, because I felt it was very important to train myself as an architect and learn everything I could in this profession, to be able to provide that discipline in my work. But after that training, I went back to the elders and I said, I have this training and I want to be able to serve you. Can you train me in my heart to be a better human being? And so I felt it was very important to go through the training of the elders, doing the sweat lodges, the vision quests, and the sun dances, and all these things that connect us to each other and connect us to the earth. I thought that was fundamental in my education as an individual and as an architect.
Yeah, and you came back to that in the documentary, and several times I've talked to you, you come back to that importance and that role of ceremony, and I think it's absolutely vital, and it makes you who you are, and your architecture what your architecture is. So that's, I'm glad you're mentioning that, because I think we have an audience that is perhaps maybe starting out in their profession, maybe even starting out on their journey, and they can sort of understand the importance that ceremony has played in your life. I'd like to go back for a second and speak again of St. Mary's Church. Everything I've read about St. Mary's Church sort of indicates that it was not an easy project to design and construct, and I can only imagine the forces aligned against you were formidable. In the documentary, you speak of resilience, especially as it refers to Indigenous people. This resilience that you have must have helped you as a young architect to literally have to stare down bureaucrats, administrators, even seasoned engineers to get your design built. I would like to say that young Indigenous professionals have an easier time now than they did in your case, but I worry that I would be lying if I did say that. What words of wisdom could you share with these young Indigenous people when they face such adversity as you face in your first project?
Well, I feel that you have the strength and resilience by turning to the power of your own culture and your own elders. I mean, I think that our people have gone through so much and still have that beautiful power of coming from the heart, still loving and caring, and forgiveness. One very important thing is always keep your heart open so that you can communicate and talk from the heart, because that makes us all the same. When you speak from heart to heart, you're speaking to the spiritual nature that we all have. We're all spiritual beings, and it's very important to speak from heart to heart, to talk to that spirit of the individual that's in front of you, and believe in that, and believe that we're at par with each other, and that we're speaking from heart to heart. And in that way, I believe that you can, in sharing that, you create a better understanding with the person that's you're addressing. And I felt that was the only way that I could communicate to the people that I've been working with, and the people I'm serving. Indeed, I was asked by the elders to talk to Pierre Elliott Trudeau about the white paper, and how that was not going to serve our people at all. It would just wipe out all of our traditions and culture, and so I was asked to go on a ceremony with the elders and put together a strong statement from the heart to be able to make a submission to the Prime Minister and the cabinet. And so through ceremony and fasting and whatever, and with the elders, we had a vision together to be able to choose the right words to the Prime Minister to address our concerns. And immediately he got it. He really got it. And he supported us. And he even put Indigenous rights in the Constitution. And that's all because of the teachings of my elders. It was them. I was just a vehicle for their teachings in my discussions with the Prime Minister. And he just turned his thinking around and stopped thinking from his head and started thinking from his heart. And he made such a difference by putting Indigenous rights into the Constitution. So that started from my elders. And it was so difficult at the time because our elders couldn't practice their traditions. They weren't allowed. And so my elders all left the reserves and went into the mountains, and there practiced all the ceremonies. And so in order to be trained, we had to ford rivers and do whatever we could to get to the camp. It was Robert Smallboy's camp that gathered all the elders together in Alberta at that time and kept the teachings and followed them every day. And so we'd come there and we'd learn about the teachings and be involved in the ceremonies, and it was just amazing that they did that, because they kept the teachings alive, in very difficult conditions in the mountains with teepees and tents, and their families and children were there. and it was sometimes, like -40, -50. It was a very difficult thing they went through in order to be able to keep the culture and to train us all of how to be able to speak a very strong voice on behalf of the people. And so I have to really acknowledge them for their contribution.
Great. And I see there's a question that's coming up a bit in the chat, and it mirrors very closely a question that I'm going to ask. This is the next one. Cities have changed a great deal over the past 50 years, here in Canada and around the world. The experience of Indigenous peoples in cities is often associated with high rates of urban poverty, low educational attainment, and other forms of systematic barriers. Of course, this is all part of a long and complex history which remains unresolved. Indigenous people and communities are resilient and are forging their own path, but urban inequality is still very much a challenge. What would you say to today's urban planners and architects as they design Canadian cities? What is the role of the professions in reconciliation and empowering Indigenous people in cities?
I think that we have to design our cities more organically to be in harmony with nature. Right now, they look like cancerous growths that are in grid-like patterns that are just gobbling up the environments around them and polluting and destroying all life around them. And we are more intelligent creatures than looking at ourselves like a virus, a cancer on the planet that's really jeopardizing our host, our mother, the earth. I mean, a cancer is a rather stupid group of cells that kills its host and then dies in the process. Surely we have more intelligence than that, and we have the ability to do that. We are marvelous creatures, and we have that gift of creativity. The Creator has given that marvelous gift for us. No other being on this planet has that gift of creativity. And so we have to be responsible with that powerful gift we have. We have to be responsible for the fact that we have been given this gift of creativity. And what are we going to do with it? Are we going to be irresponsible like we have been doing it with that power that we have? We're the most powerful creatures on this planet. We're godlike beings, and we can do amazing things. And so why not put that power in a good way to live in harmony with all life around us? And we need to do that in order to save our planet, because we are destroying it. And we, as they say, we shape our environment, but in turn it shapes us. So we as architects can shape our environment in a beautiful way that works in harmony with nature and create beautiful cities that are loving and caring for every individual in the city. And it means that we have to put our ego aside of feeling that we're dominion over nature and understanding that we are nature, that we evolved from all life on this planet, and that we have to respect all of our life givers, which is all of the things that we use around us and all the animals and plants that we that have to die to give us life. Our life givers we have to respect, and that is the knowledge that our people have that lived in harmony before the settlers came. And we have to learn how to do that again, learn how to be in harmony. And in our cities, are exploitive beings not only exploit our environment, but they exploit the people within them. And that's the problem we have. And we can turn that around. We have to believe we can turn that around, for heaven's sake. You know, we are creative people. We can do anything. You know, we can go to the moon and back. We can go to other planets, but we have this planet that we have to preserve and save. And we have to start now.
Yeah, I love your statement that our single greatest attribute as a race is this idea of creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, I've thought about that for years as well. And it doesn't matter whether you're creating a piece of art or a building, whatever that is our single greatest strength, is this idea of creativity and using that idea to create better and bigger things. I seeing on the chat one other question that I think is going to be important to ask, because it comes up, and this wasn't one we've talked about previously, but it's this idea that, and was brought up in the film as well, this idea of the terrible nature of housing on reserves. And as an architect, what do you think can be done about that problem of reserve housing being, inefficient, in not serving the needs of the people, etc. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, for one thing is that people say in the governments in Ottawa can't be so egotistical to believe that they can solve the housing problems within their heads here in Ottawa. They have to go to the community themselves and have the people design the kind of facilities they need. Listen to the people. It's always a one-way communication between government and our people. They always feel they know best, and they don't, because of the evidence that we see. They do not know best. So it's the people that know best what their needs are. Ask the people what they need, and work with them so that they can participate in the design of their communities, and to be able to, in the design of their housing. And up north, I was working with the people, and I came across a book from the government. They had a house design that just was not suitable for the people, for the area, for anything. It was only suitable for somebody in Ottawa who had a idea in their mind of how people should live. And then there was a book that went along with this house that they were trying to force on the people, how to live in a house. You know, like the people didn't even have the knowledge and intelligence how to live in a house that was designed by settlers when they had lived on that land for thousands of years and have thrived on that land, living in their natural dwellings that they developed. About that's the height of arrogance, you know, and when people believe they know what's best for other people instead of asking them, you know, and that's the problem we have is that. And now what I'm concerned about is everybody's understanding our problems. And now we're going to get a bunch of expertise of people coming in to solve our problems. You know, is that the new phase of colonization 201? We already went through 101. The new stage of having a bunch of intellects sort of solve our problems instead of asking us. that's the next challenge that we're facing is maybe one should learn about one's failures. And it's a huge failure between the settler culture who have decided that they know what's best. And I think that we can learn from each other. I think for me, it was so important to learn about the contribution of European architecture, going back even to the times of the Egyptian, learning about what architects have done and major architects and their contribution to their cultures and everything. I felt it was very vital to know everything I could about architecture and engineering. And I feel these two worldviews should come together. Why shouldn't the best of both worlds come together to create an amazing culture together? I mean, I think that the settler culture can learn a lot from our culture that has been here thousands of years, you know, and I feel that that's what should happen. I remember being quite ill and quite upset when the elders were healing me, because I got so upset about what I saw in the dominant culture and how they were behaving, that I became very, very ill. And so I went on fast with the elders so that I'd be in harmony. And I felt a worldview was in harmony with me. And every time I came into the settler culture, I got disturbed and ill. So I went back to the elders and said, well, I feel really happy and good and balanced in your community here. But I'm an architect, for heaven's sake, and I can't even stand walking in our cities. And how can I be an architect and make a contribution to the world out there? And when I am living in this beautiful bubble of the indigenous world. And so the elder put me on a long fast and said, you know, you have to go on this long fast. And so while I was on the fast, in this bubble that the elder provided me, all of a sudden the bubble came into a bubble twice as big. It went bloop. So I could see that, you know, that it was very important to embrace the whole world and embrace both cultures, and that it wasn't all about living in one world or another. It was about living on a world where we all coexist together in a loving and caring way.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm very conscious of the time, so I hate to cut you off, Douglas, but that was awesome and exceptional. And I'd just like to add one thought before we go, is that I don't think any architect in Canada should graduate from architecture school without having first built a traditional Indigenous structure that comes from the area that they live in with an Indigenous person and done all the teachings of that structure. I think that would help all architects everywhere. And I say the same thing about engineers. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended. Thank you very much, Elder Cardinal. It has been an honor for me. And I hope one day that I can actually take time out and meet you in person somewhere. It's been an absolute honor. Thanks, Andre, for this, and Idoia for putting this together. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Douglas. And I don't know if we're still on, but if